The Boston Heritage Foundation's annual masquerade ball was in full swing at the Whitmore Hotel's Grand Ballroom. Thaddeus Blackwood adjusted his obsidian mask and surveyed the crowd with detachment. These charity events were necessary evils, opportunities to maintain his public image while securing business connections. Nothing more. Another scotch, neat, he told the bartender, who hurried to comply. Everyone seemed to sense who he was despite the mask, the sharp suit, the commanding presence, the slight scar visible on his jawline. Everyone except her. Mind if I hide here for a moment? A woman in a midnight blue gown slipped into the space beside him. Her silver mask caught the light as she glanced over her shoulder. My former boss is here, and I'd rather avoid explaining why I quit. Thad raised an eyebrow. People didn't approach him casually. By all means. I'm Stella, by the way. She offered her hand instead of her real name. Exactly what these masquerades were for. Alexander. He replied with equal dishonesty, taking her hand. So what terrible offense did this boss commit? He wanted to tear down a historical building to put up luxury condos. She sipped her champagne. I was supposed to create the PR campaign, making it sound like progress. Thad nearly choked on his scotch. He'd done exactly that last month. Funny thing is, she continued, oblivious to his discomfort, I don't think these developers are all villains. Most are just disconnected from the communities they're changing. Perhaps some communities need changing, he countered, playing devil's advocate to his own corporate strategies. Change, yes. Erasure, no. Her eyes behind the mask were fiercely intelligent. History and progress can coexist. I just couldn't sell a lie. For the first time in years, Thad found himself genuinely engaged in conversation. This woman, Stella, spoke with conviction but without the fawning deference he usually encountered. As the night progressed, they debated architecture, urban development, and the ethics of progress. She challenged him without knowing who he was, and he found himself wondering who she might be behind her mask. Dance with me, she said suddenly when the orchestra began a waltz. I don't dance. Everyone dances. Some just forget how. She took his hand, leading him to the floor before he could object further. As they moved across the ballroom, something shifted. The careful distance Thad maintained from the world seemed to dissolve with each step. Her hand was warm in his, her laughter genuine when he missed a step. For a few precious moments, he wasn't Thaddeus Blackwood, the wolf of Manhattan who'd lost everything that mattered years ago. He was just Alexander, dancing with a woman who saw him as a man, not a portfolio. Later, they stood on the terrace overlooking the hotel gardens. The night air carried the scent of roses and possibility. I should go, she said, though she made no move to leave. Or you could stay. The words surprised him as much as her. She studied him for a long moment. Who are you, really, Alexander? Tonight? Just a man who's tired of being alone. It was the most honest thing he'd said in years. She traced the edge of his mask with her fingertip. We keep these on. Just tonight. No reality, no consequences. Just us. Just us, he agreed. Their kiss tasted of champagne and secrets. In his suite, with only moonlight illuminating their bodies, they created a temporary truth. One where his scars didn't matter, where her identity remained a mystery, where connection was possible without history or future. In the glow of dawn, Thad watched her sleeping. For one reckless moment, he considered removing his mask, telling her his real name, asking for hers. But the morning light was already breaking the spell, reminding him who he really was. A man who'd built walls for good reason. She stirred, opening her eyes. Good morning. Morning. He handed her a cup of coffee from the room service tray. They dressed in comfortable silence, both understanding the implicit agreement. No questions, no contact information, no future. At the door, she paused. Thank you for last night, Alexander. It was perfect, he finished for her. Because it ends here. She nodded, a sad smile playing at her lips. Goodbye, then. After she left, Thad removed his mask and stared at his reflection in the mirror. The wolf of Manhattan looked back at him, eyes harder than they'd been yesterday. He told himself this was better, a perfect memory, uncomplicated by reality. By the time his private jet touched down in New York that afternoon, he'd almost convinced himself it was true. What he couldn't know was that 3 months later, in a Brooklyn apartment, Serena Valente would stare at a positive pregnancy test, wondering how to find a man who never existed beyond a single perfect night. Mr. Blackwood, Your 10 o'clock is waiting. Thad's executive assistant, Diana Winters, stood at his office door with her ever-present tablet. Thad didn't look up from the development plans spread across his desk. The Cobble Hill project? Yes, sir. The final acquisition team is here with the neighborhood assessment. The Brooklyn expansion represented everything Blackwood Enterprises stood for: efficiency, progress, and profit. The proposed luxury complex would revitalize a declining neighborhood while delivering a 22% return on investment. The fact that 18 small businesses would be displaced was simply collateral damage in the march of progress. Send them in. 4 men in identical dark suits filed in, led by Victor Reeves, Thad's director of acquisitions. They'd worked together long enough that Victor knew exactly what information to present and what to omit. We've secured agreements from 14 property owners, Victor reported. The remaining 4 are proving stubborn. Thad leaned back in his chair. Increase the offers by 15%. If that doesn't work, remind them about their property tax situations. There's one particular holdout that might require your personal attention. Victor slid a folder across the desk. A family restaurant called Valente's. Been there for 30 years. The owner is particularly vocal about preservation. Thad skimmed the file without interest. What's their weakness? That's the issue, sir. We can't find one. No debt, clean taxes, profitable business. The owner, Serena Valente, inherited it from her father 6 months ago. She's organizing the other holdouts. Thad frowned at the name. Something about it tugged at his memory, though he couldn't place why. Send our legal team to review their lease agreements. There's always a vulnerability. There's something else. Victor hesitated. The neighborhood's rallying around her. Local news is picking up the story. It could become a PR issue. Thad closed the folder with a sharp snap. Schedule a meeting with Ms. Valente. I'll handle it personally. Across the East River in Brooklyn, Serena Valente hunched over the toilet in her tiny apartment bathroom, emptying the contents of her stomach for the 3rd morning in a row. This can't be happening, she muttered, pressing her forehead against the cool porcelain. Not now, when everything in her life was already in free fall. The pregnancy test on the counter, the 4th she'd taken, displayed its conclusive pink line with unwavering certainty. She was pregnant, by a man she'd known for one night, a man she had no way of finding. Her phone rang, the caller ID showing her best friend and sous chef, Maya. Tell me you're on your way, Maya said when Serena answered. The community meeting starts in 20 minutes, and everyone's waiting for you. The community meeting. The developer. The fight for her restaurant. Reality crashed back. I'll be there, Serena promised, pulling herself together. Her personal crisis would have to wait. Right now, 18 small business owners and their employees were counting on her to lead their resistance against the corporate giant threatening to destroy their livelihoods. 15 minutes later, Serena stood before a packed room in the back of Valente's. The assembled faces looked to her with a mixture of hope and desperation. Blackwood Enterprises isn't just buying buildings, she told them, her voice steady despite her churning stomach. They're trying to erase our history. My father didn't build this restaurant just for it to become luxury condos for people who've never savored his carbonara. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. We've dealt with developers before, said Mr. Abrams from the bookstore. But Blackwood is different. The Wolf of Manhattan doesn't negotiate, he devours. Then we change the game, Serena countered. We've created a petition to have our block designated as a historical district. We need 5,000 signatures. That'll take months, someone objected. We don't have that kind of time. We also need media attention, Serena continued. Maya's cousin works at the Times. She's promised to help place our story. As the meeting progressed, Serena outlined their strategy: delay tactics, public pressure, and a united front. What she didn't tell them was how terrified she was. The restaurant wasn't just her livelihood. It was her heritage, the last connection to her father. After everyone left, Serena sank into a booth, finally allowing herself to acknowledge the life-altering news she'd received that morning. Pregnant. How would she fight a corporate titan while preparing for a child? How would she run a restaurant with morning sickness and doctor appointments? The irony wasn't lost on her. For years she'd dreamed of having a family, carrying on the Valente legacy. Now that it was happening, everything else she'd worked for was under threat. Her phone chimed with an email notification. The subject line made her breath catch. Meeting request, Thaddeus Blackwood, CEO. Serena's hands trembled as she read the message. The Wolf of Manhattan himself wanted to meet with her tomorrow morning at Blackwood Enterprises headquarters. She drafted and deleted 4 different responses before settling on a simple acceptance. If Blackwood thought he could intimidate her in person, he was underestimating her. She'd fight for her restaurant with everything she had. That night, Serena couldn't sleep. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind raced with impossible scenarios. Facing down the notorious billionaire while secretly carrying a child, fighting to save her father's legacy while creating a new one of her own. By dawn, she'd made a decision. She would face Thaddeus Blackwood, and she would not back down. What she couldn't possibly know was that across the city, Thad Blackwood sat in his penthouse, reviewing her file again, inexplicably drawn to the name and the restaurant. Something about it tugged at his memory, a fragment of conversation from another life. He dismissed the feeling. Tomorrow, he would meet Serena Valente, and by the end of that meeting, he would own her property, one way or another. Neither of them could have imagined how their worlds would collide, or how the masks they'd both worn for so long were about to fall away completely. Serena stepped into the Blackwood Enterprises lobby, a gleaming monument to power and wealth. 70 floors of glass and steel towered above Manhattan, housing the man who threatened everything she loved. She straightened her blazer, the only professional outfit that still fit comfortably, and approached the reception desk. Serena Valente for Thaddeus Blackwood. The receptionist's polite smile didn't reach her eyes. Mr. Blackwood is expecting you. 68th floor. The elevator ride gave Serena precious minutes to gather her thoughts. She had rehearsed her arguments all night. The historical significance of the neighborhood, the community impact of small businesses, the cultural heritage that couldn't be replaced by luxury developments. What she hadn't prepared for was the wave of nausea that hit as the elevator doors opened. Perfect timing. Ms. Valente, a sleek assistant greeted her. Mr. Blackwood will see you now. Serena followed her down a corridor lined with modern art pieces, each likely worth more than her restaurant's annual revenue. The assistant opened a door to a corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Ms. Valente, sir. Thad didn't look up immediately from the documents on his desk. Thank you, Diana. That will be all. Serena stood frozen at the threshold. The man behind the desk was unmistakable. The sharp jawline, the intense focus, the slight scar visible near his collar. Alexander. Not Alexander. Thaddeus Blackwood. Her heart hammered against her ribs. The father of her child was the Wolf of Manhattan. When Thad finally looked up, something flickered across his face. A fleeting moment of recognition, quickly replaced by his usual impassive expression. But Serena caught it. He felt it too. That strange familiarity, like remembering a dream. Ms. Valente. He stood, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. Please sit. Serena remained standing. You're destroying my neighborhood to build luxury condos. His eyes narrowed slightly. Clients and competitors typically began these meetings with pleasantries or nervous deference. I'm revitalizing an underperforming area. You're erasing history for profit. I'm creating something new. That's progress. His voice. It was definitely him. Though the warmth she remembered from that night in Boston was gone, replaced by cool efficiency. Did he recognize her? Or had she been just another forgettable encounter? Progress doesn't require destruction, she argued. The building that houses my restaurant was built in 1892. 3 generations of my family have served that community. Sentimentality is expensive, Ms. Valente. The market determines value, not memory. His words were dismissive, yet something in his manner seemed off. He kept glancing at her, then away, as if trying to place her. The room suddenly felt too warm, the morning sickness threatening to return. Were you in Boston 3 months ago? The question escaped before she could stop it. Thad went still, his expression unreadable. Why do you ask? The Boston Heritage Foundation masquerade ball. Serena swallowed hard. You were there, weren't you? Recognition dawned in his eyes, followed quickly by disbelief. Stella. The name, her false name, hung in the air between them. For a moment, neither spoke, both absorbing the implications. Sit down, he finally said, his tone gentler than before. Please. This time, Serena complied, grateful for the support as another wave of nausea washed over her. She closed her eyes briefly, fighting for control. Are you all right? Thad asked, concern breaking through his professional facade. Fine. She couldn't finish the sentence as the nausea intensified. Where's your bathroom? He pointed to a door in the corner. Serena barely made it in time, emptying the contents of her stomach into the toilet. When she emerged, Thad stood by the window, his back to her, shoulders tense. Morning sickness, she explained quietly, returning to her seat. It doesn't care about important meetings. She watched comprehension transform his face as he turned to face her. The composed businessman vanished, replaced by something raw and unguarded. You're pregnant. It wasn't a question, but she answered anyway. Yes. His gaze dropped to her midsection, then back to her face. And the father was wearing a mask. Serena met his eyes steadily. Called himself Alexander. Thad sank into his chair, the full weight of the situation descending on him. The woman organizing resistance to his Brooklyn development, the stubborn restaurant owner he'd intended to pressure into selling, was carrying his child. How far along? His voice was barely audible. 12 weeks. I'm due in early February. He ran a hand over his face, his mind racing. A child. His child. After swearing he'd never risk fatherhood again, never expose himself to that kind of potential loss. What do you want from me? He asked, his tone guarded. Serena's eyes flashed with anger. I didn't come here for anything relating to this pregnancy. I came to save my restaurant, which you're trying to demolish. The development plans were approved months ago. Before you knew, you were destroying the livelihood of the mother of your child. The words hung between them, sharp and undeniable. Thad stood abruptly, moving to the window. Below, Manhattan stretched out in a grid of possibilities and consequences. He'd built his empire on control and calculated risks. This was neither. I'll need to confirm, of course, he said, his back still to her. Confirm what? That it's yours. Serena stood, gathering her purse. Do whatever you need to do, Mr. Blackwood. But understand this. I'm having this baby with or without your involvement, and I'm saving my restaurant with or without your cooperation. I don't need your money or your name. She headed for the door, pausing with her hand on the knob. You know where to find me when you've made your decision. After she left, Thad remained at the window, watching her small figure emerge from the building 68 floors below. In the reflection of the glass, he barely recognized himself. The carefully constructed facade of Thaddeus Blackwood, the Wolf of Manhattan, seemed suddenly transparent, revealing the ghost of a man he'd thought long buried. He pressed his forehead against the cool glass. A child. After everything he'd lost, everything he'd sworn never to risk again. And not just any child, a child with her. The woman who'd seen past his mask before she'd ever known his name. Thad hadn't slept in the week since Serena Valente walked into his office. 7 days of restless thoughts, of memories from Boston colliding with the reality of who she was. Not just a woman who'd seen past his defenses for one night, but the face of resistance to his Brooklyn development. And now, the mother of his child. Cancel my afternoon meetings, he told Diana as he grabbed his coat. His assistant knew better than to question him when he used that tone. During the drive to Brooklyn, he scrolled through the report his private investigator had compiled on Serena. 32 years old, Culinary Institute of America graduate. Took over Valente's restaurant after her father's death 6 months ago. Clean financial history. No criminal record. No boyfriend. No husband. The file contained nothing that explained the strange sense of connection he felt. Nothing beyond the obvious biological reality now linking them together. Valente's restaurant was housed in a brick building on a tree-lined street. The neighborhood had character, Thad had to admit, but character didn't generate the revenue that luxury condominiums would. He parked his Aston Martin at the curb, ignoring the stares from passers-by who rarely saw such vehicles in this part of Brooklyn. A bell chimed as he entered. The restaurant was half full with lunch patrons, the aroma of garlic and fresh bread filling the air. Thad spotted Serena immediately. She moved between tables, checking on customers, her dark hair pulled back, her expression warming as she spoke with an elderly couple. She froze when she saw him. Kitchen needs you, Serena, said a woman who appeared from behind the bar, eyeing Thad suspiciously. Thanks, Maya. Serena's voice was steady despite the color draining from her face. Mr. Blackwood, would you like a table? I prefer a conversation. She nodded toward a corner booth. Give me a minute. Thad slid into the booth, taking in the restaurant's details. Photographs lined the walls, 3 generations of Valentes serving their community. The tables were well-worn but immaculate, the napkins cloth rather than paper. This wasn't just a business, it was a legacy. Serena returned with 2 glasses of water, sliding one across to him. I don't have much time. The lunch rush. I want a paternity test. Her jaw tightened. I already told you. It's standard procedure when millions of dollars are potentially involved. I don't want your money. What do you want then? Because you've made it clear it's not my help with the restaurant. Serena glanced around at her customers, keeping her voice low. I don't want anything from you except to leave my business alone. That's not going to happen, Thad replied. But I'm willing to suspend further acquisition efforts until we resolve our personal situation. She studied him, her expression guarded. Fine, I'll do the test. Then what? Then we'll discuss options. There's nothing to discuss. I'm keeping this restaurant, and I'm keeping this baby. Thad leaned forward. You're carrying a Blackwood heir. That changes everything. This child is a Valente. We'll see about that. Serena's eyes flashed with anger. Is that a threat? It's a reality. Thad stood, placing his business card on the table. My private physician will contact you to arrange the test. Discreetly. After he left, Thad didn't return immediately to his office. Instead, he directed his driver to take him to the Brooklyn Heights promenade. He needed to think, away from the corporate environment that usually focused his mind but now felt suffocating. The name Valente kept nagging at him, tugging at something in his memory that predated his encounter with Serena in Boston. He pulled out his phone, calling the one person who might have answers. Eleanor? It's Thaddeus. I need information about a family named Valente, specifically in relation to my father. His family's longtime housekeeper was silent for a moment. Valente from Brooklyn? The restaurant family. Thad's pulse quickened. Yes. Your father never spoke of them? Would I be asking if he had? Eleanor sighed. Antonio Valente worked for your grandfather for nearly 20 years before opening his restaurant. He and your mother grew up together. They were friends. The revelation hit Thad like a physical blow. Why wasn't I told this? After the accident, you shut down any mention of your parents. I tried once to tell you about your mother's connection to the Valentes, but you... I didn't want to hear it, Thad finished for her. He remembered now, Eleanor trying to share memories, and him shutting her down, too consumed by grief and rage to tolerate reminders of what he'd lost. There's more, Eleanor said hesitantly. Your mother introduced Antonio to his wife, Maria. They were witnesses at the wedding. And Antonio and Maria were what, Eleanor? They were the ones who introduced your parents to each other. Antonio was best man at their wedding. Thad gripped the railing overlooking the East River, his knuckles white. The connections were almost too perfect, too coincidental. His parents and Serena's had been deeply intertwined, and now, a generation later, their children had created a new life together. Is Antonio still alive? No, Eleanor replied gently. He passed away earlier this year. Cancer, I believe. The same illness that had taken his mother decades ago. Another connection. Thank you, Eleanor. Thad ended the call, his mind racing. The development project he'd been pushing so aggressively would destroy not just any restaurant, but one founded by his mother's childhood friend, a man who had been integral to his parents' happiness. And now, he was expecting a child with this man's daughter. Thad looked out at the Manhattan skyline across the water, the empire he'd built visible in its distinctive towers. For the first time, he questioned whether the power he'd amassed had been worth the connections he'd severed along the way. His phone chimed with a message from his investigator. DNA sample collected from Ms. Valente's water glass during lunch. Results expedited. Expecting confirmation within 24 hours. Thad stared at the message. He'd authorized the collection without her knowledge, standard procedure in his world of corporate maneuvering and legal precautions. But now it felt wrong, deceptive. This wasn't a business transaction. This was his child. Their child. His hand hovered over the phone, considering whether to call it off, to approach Serena honestly instead. But old habits won out. By this time tomorrow, he would know with certainty whether the child she carried was a Blackwood heir, and what that meant for both their futures. The DNA results arrived in Thad's private email at 5:48 a.m. He'd been awake for hours, standing at his penthouse window watching the city lights flicker as dawn approached. 99.9992% probability of paternity. He wasn't surprised, but seeing the confirmation in clinical, scientific terms made it undeniable. He was going to be a father. By 9 a.m., he was in his lawyer's office. I want custodial options, full and partial scenarios. Thad paced while his attorney, James Henderson, took notes. And draw up a proposal for financial support. Generous, but structured. What about marriage? James asked cautiously. What about it? It's the traditional approach in these situations, especially for someone of your stature. Thad stopped pacing. Marriage. The thought hadn't occurred to him, or rather, he'd dismissed it automatically. After Vanessa and Emily's deaths, he'd sworn never to create another family that could be torn from him. Just the custody and support documentation. After the meeting, Thad had his driver take him to Brooklyn again. This time, he went to Serena's apartment building, a pre-war walk-up 4 blocks from her restaurant. He hesitated before pressing the buzzer for 3B. Serena answered the door in jeans and a loose sweater, her hair damp from a recent shower. She didn't look surprised to see him. You have the results. Thad nodded. May I come in? Her apartment was small but warm, with books lining every available wall and herbs growing in pots by the window. A half-finished nursery mural was visible on one wall, an Italian countryside scene. You've been planning for the baby, he observed. Did you think I wouldn't? She gestured to the couch. Would you like coffee? I can't have any, but I just made a pot. Thank you. While she prepared his coffee, Thad noticed the photographs on her bookshelf. Serena with an older man who must be her father, Antonio, graduation photos, Serena in chef's whites. A life well documented, unlike his sterile penthouse where personal mementos were conspicuously absent. Our parents knew each other, he said when she handed him the mug. Serena nodded. I know. My father mentioned it sometimes. Your mother taught him English when they were children. Why didn't you say anything in my office? Would it have changed anything? She sat across from him. Besides, I was busy throwing up and discovering that the father of my child is the man trying to demolish my restaurant. Her directness was refreshing. Most people carefully filtered their words around him, aware of his power and reputation. I want to be involved in the child's life. Define involved. Thad set his coffee down. Joint custody. Financial support. The child will have the Blackwood name. No. No to which part? All of it. Serena's expression was determined. I won't share custody with a stranger. Money doesn't automatically make you a father. And this baby is a Valente. I'm not a stranger. I'm the father. Being a sperm donor doesn't make you a father. Where were you when I was throwing up every morning? Where will you be at 3 a.m. feedings? Will you take time away from destroying family businesses to attend school plays? Her words stung with their accuracy. Thad stood, needing movement to dispel his discomfort. I can provide opportunities you can't imagine. Private schools, international travel, financial security. I had none of those things growing up, and I turned out fine. Serena followed him to the window. My father taught me that love and presence matter more than privilege. Can you provide those, Mr. Blackwood? The formal address underscored the distance between them despite the intimate connection they now shared. I have lawyers preparing the necessary documents. Serena's laugh was bitter. Of course you do. That's how you solve everything, isn't it? With money and legal documents. What would you suggest instead? He asked, genuinely curious. Get to know me. Let me get to know you. Prove you can be more than a quarterly deposit and occasional weekend visit. The simplicity of her proposal caught him off guard. How? Start by understanding what my restaurant means to me. Why I'm fighting so hard to save it. Thad considered this. Understanding her attachment to Valentes might give him leverage in negotiating custody terms. Fine. When? Tomorrow night. Dinner service. Come at 7. We're something that won't make my customers think they're being evicted. After leaving Serena's apartment, Thad found himself driving past the Brooklyn development site. Construction equipment sat idle while the legal battles with the holdout businesses continued. He pulled over, studying the block that had become the unexpected nexus of his personal and professional lives. Later that evening, Thad entered Valentes through the back door as instructed. The kitchen was organized chaos, cooks calling orders, waitstaff rushing in and out, the sharp scent of garlic and wine filling the air. Serena spotted him and approached, wiping her hands on her apron. You came. I said I would. You'll observe tonight. Nothing more. She handed him an apron. If anyone asks, you're a potential investor considering franchising opportunities. Thad raised an eyebrow. You'd never franchise. Exactly. But but it explains why you're here without alarming my staff. For the next 4 hours, Thad witnessed a side of life he'd never experienced. He watched Serena transform ingredients into art, manage her kitchen with firm but respectful authority, and interact with customers who clearly considered her family. He observed the elderly couple who came every Tuesday for 40 years, the young parents celebrating their anniversary where they'd had their first date, the neighborhood kids who stopped by for leftover tiramisu after school. As the night progressed, he found himself helping, carrying plates, restocking wine, even washing dishes when they fell behind. His hands, more accustomed to signing contracts than manual labor, developed blisters. His custom shirt was stained beyond rescue. And yet, he felt more engaged, more present than he had in years. When the last customer left, Serena collapsed into a chair, rubbing her feet. "Now do you understand?" Thad sat across from her, exhausted in a way board meetings never left him. "This isn't just a business to you. It's my heritage, my community, my father's legacy." She studied him. "What's your legacy, Thaddeus?" "More glass towers that look like every other building in Manhattan." The question lingered between them as they shared a late dinner of leftover risotto. For the first time, Thad wondered if the empire he'd built was truly the legacy he wanted to leave his child. Reed Harrington studied the tabloid headline with calculated interest. "Wolf of Manhattan spotted in Brooklyn kitchen." The accompanying grainy photo showed Thaddeus Blackwood in an apron, looking decidedly out of place in the modest restaurant. The article speculated about a potential new business venture. Reed knew better. His sources had informed him about Blackwood's repeated visits to Valente's restaurant over the past 2 weeks, one of the very establishments standing in the way of Blackwood's lucrative Brooklyn development. Something wasn't adding up. "Find out everything about the owner," Reed instructed his assistant. "And I mean everything." At 58, Reed had once been Thad's mentor, welcoming the grief-stricken young man into the cutthroat world of New York real estate after the accident that claimed his family. He'd taught Thad everything, until his protege outmaneuvered him on the Hudson Yards project, costing Reed millions and publicly humiliating him. Now, 6 years later, any weakness in Thaddeus Blackwood's armor represented an opportunity for retribution. Across town, Thad sat in his executive boardroom, only half listening as his development team presented updated acquisition strategies for the Brooklyn project. His phone vibrated with a message from Serena. "Ultrasound at 2 p.m. Still coming? Mr. Blackwood?" Victor Reeves was looking at him expectantly. "Continue with the legal actions against the remaining properties," Thad instructed, rising from his chair. "I have an appointment. But, sir, we need your decision on the increased offer, too. It will wait until tomorrow." Silence fell over the room as Thad exited. In the elevator, he straightened his tie, an unfamiliar nervousness settling in his stomach. He'd never attended an ultrasound before. With Vanessa, he'd been in Tokyo during her first appointment, then Switzerland, then Chicago. Always another deal, another meeting. By the time Emily was born, he'd been present but distracted, taking calls during labor. The regret of those choices had only intensified after losing them. Serena was already in the waiting room when he arrived, flipping through a parenting magazine. She seemed surprised to see him. "You came. I said I would." They'd established an uneasy truce over the past 2 weeks. Thad had suspended active legal action against Valentes, while Serena had agreed to monthly prenatal updates. Neither mentioned the development project or custody arrangements, though both topics simmered beneath their cautious conversations. "Ms. Valente," a nurse called. "We're ready for you." Thad followed Serena into the examination room, feeling distinctly out of place among the diagrams of fetal development and breast pumps. He stood awkwardly by the wall as Serena settled onto the examination table. "First time, Dad." The technician smiled as she prepared the ultrasound machine. Thad began, not sure how to answer. "Yes," Serena interjected. "He's a little nervous." The technician applied gel to Serena's abdomen. "That's normal. Wait until you hear the heartbeat. That usually makes it real for dads." Thad was about to correct her assumption about their relationship when the room filled with a rapid, rhythmic sound, like distant hoofbeats, quick and determined. "There it is," the technician said. "Strong heartbeat, right on target." On the screen, a grainy image appeared. Thad stepped closer, mesmerized as the technician pointed out features: the head, the spine, tiny arms and legs. Would you like to know the sex? She asked. Serena looked at Thad, a silent question. It's your decision, he said. I want to know. The technician moved the wand, studying the screen. Looks like a boy. Congratulations. A son. Thad felt the room tilt slightly. He was going to have a son. Serena reached for his hand without thinking, her eyes bright with tears. A boy. For a moment, the complications between them, the development project, the custody negotiations, their fundamentally different worldviews, all fell away. They were just two people witnessing the miracle of their child's development. The spell broke when Thad's phone rang. Reed Harrington's name flashed on the screen. He silenced it, but the damage was done. You should take it, Serena said, withdrawing her hand. I know how important your business is. After the appointment, Thad insisted on driving Serena home. They sat in traffic on the Brooklyn Bridge, the ultrasound images in an envelope between them. I've been thinking about names, Serena ventured. Already. My father's name was Antonio. We could call him Tony for short. Thad hesitated. I was thinking perhaps Theodore, after my grandfather. The awkward silence that followed highlighted how little they knew about each other despite the permanent connection they now shared. We have time to decide, Serena said finally. Serena, Thad began, choosing his words carefully. The call I received, it was from Reed Harrington. He's a former colleague. His interest in my activities is concerning. Why? Reed is opportunistic and vindictive. If he discovers our connection, he could use it against both of us. How would my pregnancy affect your business? It's not just business. Reed was there after my family died. He knows what losing them did to me. Serena turned to face him fully. What exactly happened to your family, Thad? You've never said. The traffic inched forward as Thad struggled with whether to share the story he rarely discussed. It was a car accident. 7 years ago, my wife Vanessa and our daughter Emily were driving to meet me for dinner. I was running late, closing a deal. His knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Their car went off the Hutchinson River Parkway. The investigators said it was a mechanical failure, but I always wondered. Wondered what? If it was something more. There were inconsistencies in the reports. But I was so consumed by grief that I stopped asking questions. And Reed knows something about this? Reed knows everything about me. That's what makes him dangerous. When they reached her apartment, Serena hesitated before getting out of the car. Come up for a minute. I have something to show you. In her apartment, she retrieved a worn photo album from a bookshelf. I found this after my father died. She opened it to a yellowed photograph. Two couples on a beach, arms around each other, laughing. With a jolt, Thad recognized his parents alongside Antonio and Maria Valente. They were friends, Serena said softly. Real friends, not just business connections. Thad stared at his father's face, relaxed, happy, so different from the stern businessman he remembered. I never knew this side of them. Maybe there's a lot we both don't know. Their moment of connection was interrupted by Thad's phone. A text from his head of security, Harrington's investigator spotted at Valente's restaurant. Asking questions about you and Ms. Valente. Thad showed Serena the message. This is happening faster than I expected. What does he want? To hurt me. And now he's going to use you to do it. Serena placed a protective hand over her stomach. Let him try. The following evening, Thad arrived at Serena's apartment with 2 security professionals. This is excessive, Serena protested as they conducted a sweep for surveillance devices. Reed doesn't make idle threats. Thad watched as his security team checked her phone, laptop, and apartment. If he's investigating our connection, he's planning something. What could he possibly find? We're having a baby. It's hardly scandalous in this century. For most people, no? For me, Thad hesitated. My entire identity was rebuilt around never being vulnerable again. Reed knows that. He'll use this pregnancy to suggest I've gone soft, that I'm compromised. Would that be so terrible? Serena asked quietly. The security team finished their sweep. All clear, Mr. Blackwood. We've installed counter-surveillance on Ms. Valente's devices and upgraded her apartment security. We'll monitor for unusual activity. After they left, Serena made tea while Thad paced her small living room. You need to tell me about them, she said, handing him a mug. Your wife and daughter. If Reed's going to use your past against you, I should understand what happened. Thad stood at the window, watching Brooklyn's lights flicker on as dusk settled. Vanessa was British, art historian. We met when her museum was negotiating to purchase a building I owned. A faint smile touched his lips. She called me a capitalist Philistine in our first meeting. Sounds like love at first sight. For me, it was. She took more convincing. Thad sipped his tea. We married after 6 months. Emily was born a year later. She was perfect, curious about everything, fearless. Serena settled on the couch, watching him struggle with memories he clearly hadn't shared in years. The night of the accident, we were supposed to meet for dinner. I was closing the Westchester deal, the one that put Blackwood Enterprises on the map. I called to say I'd be late, just 30 minutes. His voice tightened. They never made it to the restaurant. Police said the car's steering failed on a curve. They went through the guardrail. I'm so sorry, Thad. I was identified as next of kin and rushed to the hospital. Emily was already gone. Vanessa. He set down the mug, his hand unsteady. She lived long enough to see me. She couldn't speak, but her eyes. He turned away, his shoulders rigid. I promised her I'd find out what happened. Instead, I buried myself in work, building the company bigger, stronger, making myself untouchable. The silence stretched between them as Serena absorbed the weight of his confession. What did you mean yesterday about inconsistencies in the reports? The mechanical failure was too clean. No warning signs, no recall issues with the model. And there were unusual transfers in Vanessa's accounts the week before. Money moving between our joint accounts and ones I didn't recognize. Did you investigate? I started to. Then I stopped. Self-loathing edged his voice. I told myself it wouldn't bring them back. The truth is, I was afraid of what I might find. What about Reed? Where does he fit in this? Reed was my mentor after the accident. He took advantage of my grief, guided my business decisions when I could barely function. We were partners until the Hudson Yards project 6 years ago. I discovered he was double-dealing, cutting side arrangements that would have cost us millions. I forced him out publicly, and he's been waiting for revenge ever since. Reed's specialty is finding weaknesses. For years, I made sure I didn't have any. Thad finally turned to face her. Then I met you. Serena stood, moving to join him by the window. I'm not a weakness, Thad. Caring about someone, about our child, makes me vulnerable in ways I haven't been since Vanessa and Emily died. It also makes you human. Their eyes met, the space between them charged with unspoken possibilities. For a moment, Thad allowed himself to imagine a different future, one with Serena and their son, with family dinners and bedtime stories instead of boardrooms and development projects. His phone shattered the moment. A text from Diana, emergency board meeting called by minority shareholders. Reed Harrington requesting attendance. I have to go. What's happening? Reed's making his move. The Blackwood Enterprises boardroom was unusually full when Thad arrived. Board members whispered among themselves, falling silent as he entered. Reed Harrington sat near the head of the table, looking satisfied. Thaddeus, so glad you could join us. Reed's smile didn't reach his eyes. We were just discussing some concerning developments regarding the Brooklyn project. Thad took his seat at the head of the table. I wasn't aware we had a meeting scheduled. This was called under Article 7 of the bylaws. When the CEO appears to have a conflict of interest, the board can convene to discuss. Reed slid a folder across the table. These photos were taken over the past 3 weeks. Inside were surveillance photos. Thad entering Valente's restaurant. Thad and Serena at the doctor's office. Thad carrying groceries into her apartment building. Your point, Reed. My point is that you're romantically involved with Serena Valente, the primary obstacle to our Brooklyn development. A development that represents 18% of our projected annual revenue. Murmurs rippled through the room. My personal life is not board business, Thad stated coldly. It is when it compromises shareholder value. Reed stood, addressing the room. Thaddeus has suspended legal action against the Valente property. He's halted construction preparation. Meanwhile, our carrying costs continue at $230,000 per week. The delay is strategic, Thad countered. We're exploring alternative approaches. Alternative approaches? Like working in her kitchen? Reed projected an image onto the wall, the tabloid photo of Thad in an apron. Or perhaps your alternative approach is this? The next image froze the room. Serena's ultrasound, the word boy, clearly visible in the corner. Thad felt the blood drain from his face. How did you get that? The Wolf of Manhattan is having a child with the woman standing between us and millions in profits. Reed looked around the table. This isn't strategy. This is compromise. His judgment is impaired by personal entanglements. Victor Reeves cleared his throat. Mr. Blackwood, is this true? Are you and Ms. Valente expecting a child? Thad surveyed the faces of his board, the people he'd chosen for their business acumen and loyalty. Now they watched him with a mixture of curiosity and concern, waiting to see how the notorious Wolf of Manhattan would handle this revelation. Yes, Thad admitted. Ms. Valente is pregnant with my child. However, this has not affected my commitment to Blackwood Enterprises or the Brooklyn development. Then why is the project stalled? Reed pressed. Because I'm exploring a modification that would maintain the development's profitability while preserving key neighborhood elements, including Valente's restaurant. Reed scoffed. You've fought community preservation efforts for 15 years. Now suddenly you care about a restaurant? Your restaurant, since you're clearly planning to join the family business. Laughter rippled through the room, sharp and uncomfortable. Enough. Thad's voice cut through the noise. My personal relationship with Ms. Valente is separate from business decisions. The Brooklyn development will proceed with appropriate modifications. Any further discussion of my private life is off limits. The board disagrees, Reed countered. We've scheduled a vote of confidence for next week. In the meantime, all decisions regarding the Brooklyn project will require board approval. After the meeting adjourned, Reed lingered, approaching Thad with false sympathy. Fatherhood. It's left you vulnerable, just like last time. Thad froze. What did you say? Vanessa and little Emily. Such a tragedy. Reed straightened his cufflinks. Parenthood made you weak then too. You were so distracted by that child that you nearly missed the Westchester opportunity. Remember? I had to practically drag you to that final meeting. You knew I had dinner plans with them. Business comes first, Thaddeus. I taught you that after they died. Reed's smile was reptilian. Speaking of which, I've sent Ms. Valente some reading material, the full police report on your family's accident. She should understand what happens to women who come between you and business. Thad grabbed Reed by the lapels, shoving him against the wall. If you go near her, there's the wolf I know. Reed didn't struggle, but it's too late. The report was delivered an hour ago, along with some interesting financial records from that period. Did Vanessa ever explain those offshore transfers? Thad released him, his mind racing. What game are you playing? The same one you played with me over Hudson Yards. Except I aim to win. Reed straightened his jacket. You have until the board vote to decide. The Brooklyn development as originally planned, or your precious new family. Choose wisely this time. When Thad arrived at Serena's restaurant that evening, he found it closed early, the lights off. With growing dread, he tried calling her, straight to voicemail. At her apartment, no one answered his knock. His security team confirmed what he already feared. Serena had received a package, read its contents, and left in a taxi. Her phone was turned off, her location untraceable. On her kitchen table, Thad found the contents of Reed's package spread out. The accident report with photos he'd never seen, bank statements showing suspicious transfers, and a note in Reed's handwriting. Ask Thaddeus about the breaks. Ask him what business was more important than his family that night. Beside it lay a sonogram picture, their son, with a single word scrawled across it in Serena's handwriting. Why? Thad sank into a chair, the carefully constructed walls around his heart shattering like glass. Serena believed he had chosen business over his family once before. Now she thought he'd do the same to her and their child. And the worst part was, he couldn't entirely blame her. Because until this pregnancy, that's exactly who he had been. 3 days passed with no sign of Serena. Thad's security team traced her to a hotel in Connecticut, then lost her trail. Her restaurant remained closed, a handwritten sign on the door citing family emergency. Thad barely left his office, working through the night, analyzing everything Reed had sent her. The accident report contained photos he'd never seen, details the police had spared him in his grief. The bank statements showed money moving to accounts he'd never authorized, accounts that had been empty days after Vanessa and Emily died. The board vote loomed 48 hours away. His legal team had prepared options: fight Reed's takeover attempt, negotiate a compromise on the Brooklyn development, or step down as CEO to pursue the truth about his family's deaths. None felt right. On the third night, Diana found him asleep at his desk. Sir. She gently shook his shoulder. There's someone here to see you. Serena? Thad straightened, hope flaring. No, sir. Amaya Rodriguez. She says she's Ms. Valente's friend. Maya stood in his reception area, arms crossed, hostility radiating from her. I shouldn't be here. Where is she? Safe. Away from you. Maya's eyes narrowed. The only reason I came is because she's making herself sick over this. The doctor says her blood pressure is dangerously high. Alarm shot through him. Is the baby's stable? For now. Maya studied him. You know, for months I listened to Serena worry about losing her father's restaurant. Then suddenly she's involved with the very man threatening to destroy it. I warned her about you. I never meant to hurt her. Yet you did. Maya placed a thumb drive on his desk. Before Antonio died, he gave this to Serena. She never opened it. Said it was labeled for emergencies only. After reading those accident reports, she finally did. What's on it? Antonio Valente was more than just your mother's childhood friend. He was her confidant. When she suspected your father was involved in something dangerous, she confided in Antonio. He hired a private investigator, kept records. Thad stared at the small device. Records of what? I don't know details. But after seeing it, Serena checked into a hotel under my name. She's afraid. Of me. Of what will happen when certain people discover she has this information. Maya headed for the door. The Hampton Inn in Yonkers, room 412. She's checking out tomorrow morning. Thank you. Maya paused. I'm not doing this for you. Antonio was like an uncle to me. His last wish was for Serena to be happy. She was starting to believe that might include you. After she left, Thad inserted the drive into his computer. It contained surveillance photos, financial records, and a video file dated 3 weeks before the accident. He clicked play. His mother's face filled the screen, looking directly into the camera. Thaddeus, if you're watching this, something has happened to me. Antonio promised to keep this safe until you needed it. She glanced over her shoulder nervously. I've discovered something about your father's business partner, Reed Harrington. He's been laundering money through our family accounts, using offshore vehicles in my name. When I confronted Richard, he said Reed threatened to ruin him if he didn't cooperate. Thad's hands trembled as his mother continued. I've gathered evidence, included on this drive. I'm taking it to the authorities next week, after your father and I return from our anniversary trip. If something happens to us, Reed is responsible. Protect yourself, Thaddeus. And remember that we love you. Always. The video ended. Thad sat motionless, his world shifting on its axis. Reed had been embezzling through his family's accounts that would have been scrutinized after their deaths. Deaths that conveniently occurred before his mother could go to the authorities. No, not their deaths. Vanessa and Emily's. With sudden clarity, Thad saw the pattern. His parents died in an accident when he was 23. Another car, another mechanical failure. Reed had taken him under his wing afterward, guiding his business decisions, becoming the father figure he'd lost. Then Vanessa had started asking questions about the company finances, about Reed's role. And then, a rage unlike anything he'd felt before surged through Thad. Reed hadn't just manipulated him all these years, he'd orchestrated the death of his family. Twice. Dawn was breaking when Thad arrived at the Hampton Inn. He knocked on room 412, his heart pounding. Serena opened the door, her eyes red-rimmed from crying, one hand protectively covering her stomach. How did you find me? Maya. She's worried about you. Thad remained in the hallway, giving her space. May I come in? After a moment's hesitation, she stepped aside. The room was sparse, institutional. On the bed lay printed documents from Antonio's drive, organized in careful piles. You've seen it all? Thad asked. Enough to understand. Serena sat on the edge of the bed. Reed Harrington killed your parents. Then when your wife started asking questions about your family's finances, he killed her and your daughter too. And now he's targeting you and our son. Why? What does he gain? Control. Power. Thad paced the small room. When my parents died, Reed guided me into taking over the family business. When Vanessa and Emily died, he was there again, helping me channel my grief into building an empire. Each time, he was positioned to influence or control Blackwood assets. And now he's forcing me to choose between the company and you. Either way, he wins. If I choose the company, I lose you and our child. If I choose you, I lose the board vote, and Reed takes control of Blackwood. Thad stopped pacing. What he doesn't realize is that there's a third option, which is justice. Thad sat beside her, careful to maintain distance. The evidence on that drive is 15 years old, but still damning. Combined with what I've found reviewing the finances from when Vanessa died, it's enough to trigger an investigation. You'd risk everything? Your company, your reputation? I already lost everything that mattered once. I won't make that mistake again. Thad finally met her eyes. Reed was right about one thing. Caring about you and our son makes me vulnerable. But he was wrong about what that means. It doesn't make me weak. It gives me something worth fighting for. Serena studied him, searching for the truth in his eyes. What happens now? Now I call the FBI. Then I face the board with the truth. And after that depends on you. Thad reached for her hand tentatively. I don't expect forgiveness, Serena. I've been cold and calculating, focused on business at the expense of humanity. Reed didn't create that in me. He just exploited it. Yet here you are, choosing a different path. Because of you. His voice roughened with emotion. You showed me that legacy isn't measured in buildings or balance sheets. It's about connections, community, the people we love. He placed his palm gently against her stomach. It's about family. For months later, the Brooklyn skyline looked much the same, minus one development that would never be built. In its place, a restored neighborhood thrived, with Valente's restaurant as its anchor. Inside the restaurant, in a private room decorated with twinkling lights, a small gathering celebrated two miracles: the birth of Elijah Antonio Blackwood 1 week earlier, and the official partnership of his parents, sealed with simple gold bands and witnessed by those who had supported their unlikely journey. Reed Harrington awaited trial on multiple charges, his financial empire dismantled by federal investigators. The evidence Thad provided had opened a Pandora's box of fraud, money laundering, and 2 reopened accident investigations. Blackwood Enterprises had survived the scandal, emerging smaller but ethically transformed under new leadership. Thad had stepped down as CEO, choosing instead to establish the Vanessa and Emily Blackwood Foundation, dedicated to neighborhood preservation and family business support across New York City. Are you sure you don't miss it? Serena asked as they swayed gently to the music, Elijah sleeping peacefully against Thad's shoulder. The boardroom, the power? Not for a second. Thad's gaze moved from their son to his wife, still amazed that fate had given him this second chance. Though I am considering a new business venture. Oh, Valente's franchising opportunities. His eyes crinkled with humor. Starting with that space in the West Village you've been eyeing. Serena laughed, standing on tiptoe to kiss him. So the Wolf of Manhattan becomes a restaurant investor. What would your old board say? That I've gone soft. Thad shifted Elijah gently as the baby stirred. They'd be right. As the evening wound down, they stepped outside into the Brooklyn night. The restaurant sign glowed with its new addition, Valente's and Blackwood. Not a corporate takeover, but a merger of equals. Not an erasure of history, but the beginning of a new chapter. Thad had spent years building walls around his heart after tragedy. It had taken a stubborn chef, an unexpected pregnancy, and the legacy of 2 intertwined families to show him that the greatest strength comes not from isolation, but from the courage to love again. Looking at Serena and their son, Thad finally understood what his mother had tried to tell him in that video. That true legacy isn't what we build, but who we love. And in that realization, the man once known as the cold-hearted Wolf of Manhattan was finally, completely, reborn. 5 years later, Daddy higher. 4-year-old Elijah squealed with delight as Thad pushed him on the swing in the community garden behind Valente's flagship restaurant. The space had once been slated for demolition as part of the Brooklyn development. Now it thrived as the heart of the neighborhood, where families gathered while waiting for tables at the now-famous eatery. Any higher, and you'll touch the clouds, Thad laughed, catching the swing to slow it down as Serena approached with their 1-year-old daughter, Sophia, balanced on her hip. The governor just arrived, Serena said, passing the baby to Thad. They're ready for the ceremony. Thad adjusted his tie with his free hand, still uncomfortable with formal events despite years of practice. Are you sure you don't want to do the honors? This was your vision. Our vision, Serena corrected, straightening his collar. Besides, the former Wolf of Manhattan cutting the ribbon on New York's first historical business protection zone makes a better story. They walked together to the front of the restaurant where a small crowd had gathered. The Valente's and Blackwood sign now adorned 7 locations across the city, each partnering with local family businesses that might otherwise have been lost to development. The governor stepped up to the microphone. 5 years ago, this neighborhood was slated for demolition. Today, it stands as a model for how progress and preservation can coexist. She gestured to Thad and Serena. Their foundation has now protected over 200 family businesses across New York while creating affordable housing and community spaces. It's my honor to designate this area as the first zone under the Blackwood-Valente Act. As applause broke out, Thad scanned the crowd. Maya was there with her husband, managing the day's service. Eleanor, his family's former housekeeper, now a regular babysitter for their children. The elderly couple who had been coming to Valente's for 45 years, now joined by their grandchildren. In the back, a reporter raised his hand. "Mr. Blackwood, you once demolished neighborhoods without a second thought. What changed?" Thad looked at Serena, then at their children. "I discovered that what makes a city great isn't its skyline, but its people. The stories they create, the communities they build. Some lessons come at a terrible price." He thought briefly of Vanessa and Emily, whose memory was honored in the foundation's work. "But if we're fortunate, we get second chances." Later that night, after the children were asleep, Thad and Serena stood on the rooftop garden of their brownstone. Across the river, Manhattan's towers glittered against the night sky. Reed's final appeal was denied. Thad said quietly, "The case is officially closed." Serena slipped her hand into his. "Are you okay?" "Better than okay." He turned to face her. "When I lost my first family, I thought the only way to survive was to never care about anything that deeply again. I built towers to replace what was taken from me. And now I understand what my mother was trying to tell me in that video. Legacy isn't what you build, it's who you become." Thad pulled her close. "The Wolf of Manhattan died the day you walked into my office pregnant with our son. You didn't just give me a child, Serena. You gave me back my humanity." As they kissed under the stars, the cold-hearted billionaire who had once valued property over people held his second chance close, knowing that some transformations, like love from unexpected places, were more powerful than any empire could ever be.